Hi Jamie and
All right,
welcome.
Simon. How's it going?
Okay, chod rig fishing.
Yep.
Can't say it's one of my big strong points. Not really a massive believer in it. Hopefully you are going to make me a believer today.
I'll try.
So let's have a little chat about the chod rigs you do. You obviously use them quite a bit.
I do indeed.
So let's have a little look, mate, and let's have a little talk through about what you got there.
Okie dokie. Well, I was pretty much the same as you, Simon. I was shown the chod rig probably about 3 or 4 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
4 years ago, and I had a little go with it, and I didn't really have all that much confidence in it, to be honest with you. I think I was tying it incorrectly. So I left it alone and just went back to my old bottom bait rigs and that. But then this one particular season, I was fishing on a big pit up near me, pretty weedy, deep pit, gin clear water, big fish angling, quite low stock. And I thought, well, I'm going to have to get on the choddies, because I knew a lot of mates of mine had done quite well on the choddies.
Right, yeah.
So I basically phoned up a mate of mine and asked him just to take me through the exact mechanics of it and how to fish it properly.
So this is actually quite imperative, isn't it? We're having a little chat off camera here, and if you don't tie this chod rig up perfectly, it's going to foul basically at times, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I'll run through it in a minute, but there's like certain things that you have to do to get the best out of the chod rig. Like, so with regard to like lead size, tubing, the length of your hook section, etc., etc.
So obviously I can see a lead there on the bottom, so let's start from there and let's work our way up, James.
Okie dokie. Right, I mean, on the water that I'm fishing at the moment, the plot that I'm fishing at the moment and baiting, the area's probably about 90, 100 yards out there.
Yeah.
So this is the actual rig off me rods. 3 ounce lead, like distance lead. I always use a distance lead because I've got to get out 100 yards, something like that.
Basically, yeah, you've got to make the distance,
it's got to get out there. My only advice would be always use the lightest lead that you can get away with.
Right,
so if you're fishing close in, you can go right down to an ounce, 3/4 of an ounce, something like that.
Is there a reason for that, a specific reason?
It's really, you're fishing over a choddy bottom, so that's a bottom that's like covered in a little bit of weed, or a little bit of chod, leaf litter, kind of silt, all of this kind of thing. So you don't really want to be wanging out a big lead because it's going to like kind of stick in the chod and stuff like this. So you just really want to flip it out there. Also, it's quite nice because it's like the minimal disturbance,
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
a great
So that's a
believer in
good
that.
tip.
Certainly.
As far as you've got to go, lightest lead as possible to get you there.
Absolutely. I mean, working up from the lead, what I always use is probably about a 2-inch section of 2mm silicone tubing, quite thick wall silicone tubing. It's quite soft.
Yeah.
Now the idea behind this is it keeps your hook section away from your lead, as you can see there. What you don't want, imagine I didn't have that tubing on there, Simon, is that your hook's going to be bashing against your lead in flight, your hook point, and there might be the chance it will take your hook point off.
Okay, so that's a very good little tip there, isn't it?
That's it. So what you're doing, you're keeping your your hook up the top end of the lead there, so it's not knocking into it.
Yeah.
Working our way up, I've got another bead, little brown bead there with quite a large bore that rests against the tubing. Now the reason you use quite soft tubing is that when the lead jams in the bottom, you don't want like stiff tubing sticking out the bottom there. You want it to all kind of fall down nice and softly like
so
this.
So it can kind of then start going over the contours of the
Absolutely.
bottom of the lake.
It follows the lead core up, and it's not kind of kicking the lead core out at an angle off the bottom.
Yeah.
Working up from that, we've got our hook section. Now that is running on a size 10 ESP Unilink swivel. Now this is another critical thing. ESP make the best swivels on the market as far as I'm concerned because they're extremely free running.
Right.
So you have to have that swivel to be as free running as possible. If you've got anything catching, you're not going to have the swiveling of the hook section actually when it's fishing in the water. So you want something that runs as freely as possible. Now that's free running up the 45-pound lead core. Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
And then what we've got is a thinking angler's bead up here. It's just like a little brown bead with like a needle-like bore going through it, and that you basically that is your stop.
So that's
up
your
the
buffer
line.
then, isn't it?
That's your buffer up the line.
Where your rig is actually finally going to stop.
That's it.
When it's out there on the bottom of the lake.
Exactly. So what you've got, you can adjust. I mean, if there's not too much chod on the bottom, you can fish your stop, like a foot, something like that. So you've still got separation between your hook section and your lead.
Now,
If it,
is there a reason that I've seen other people do this where they perhaps slide this up and fix this in position, and I can see that you've got yours free running there. Is that so because maybe that you don't know what's out there on the bottom and the depth of it?
That's it. I mean, as far as I can work out, this is my favourite way of doing it. I mean, you were mentioning a friend of yours, he uses it stopped up the line and he does equally well.
Yeah.
You know, because he's determined that there might be a certain level of weed, and so he sets his stop up here and so it rests down on the weed. I mean, I've been a great believer in have it free running. There's a certain way of casting the rig out, Simon, you know. It's like you cast out, as it kind of drops through the water a little bit, you draw it back to almost reset the hook section down there.
Okay.
So you're pulling it up, resetting the hook section, and then you're letting it down. Now that basically allows your very buoyant pop-up to ride up your lead core and set itself and then rest down.
So it rides up, hits the stop, and then the whole lot lays down. It's all laid out nicely, and the pop-up is where
That's
it should be.
It's ready for any kind of unsuspecting carp to come along. Now, moving on to like the hook section, the critical thing about a chod rig is you've got to have a buoyant pop-up. Now, in this case, I've used one of our own strawberry and condensed milk fluoro pink pop-ups. Now, these are good because they stay popped up for 48 hours, even when they're pierced, you know. I mean, in this case, I've pierced it. Sometimes I like to tie them on. It just depends what your preference is, okay?
Yeah, so piercing them doesn't make any difference.
Don't make any difference.
Yeah.
Don't make any difference whatsoever. Because the critical thing is, as it's dropping through the water, you want the whole lot to ride, as I said, ride up the lead core. Now, these super buoyant pop-ups do that. They bring it right up. If your pop-up wasn't all that buoyant, the trouble is, what you're going to have is it's going to come to rest somewhere in the middle and not be up against the buffer.
And then the rig's not being as effective as what it's designed to be. So this is actually very, very important here then, isn't it? Is the actual pop-up that you're using, test it before you use it, make sure that it's popping up and staying popped up as well. Because if this sinks after sort of 6-7 hours, your rig's just lost all its effectiveness.
Absolutely. I mean, the key thing is it has to be popped up, because as the carp comes along, it's feed. I mean, I like to use this with like a scattering of free bait around it, something like 50 baits, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't concentrate it too much because I want the carp moving between each little mouthful. So if you can imagine, he's had one, he's had another, then he comes across your hook bait, that's sitting on the bottom like this, and essentially his bottom lip touches your hook section, it spins round, he pulls against the buffer at the back here, and he's hooked, and you've got a fish on.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the good thing about the choddy is it's a go anywhere rig. It's like if you're looking at like a section of water out there, and you're not really sure what kind of bottom you're fishing over, you can fish this with confidence. As long as you get a drop through the water, as I said, you're casting it out, resetting it, feeling it drop. As long as you get it touched down on the bottom, you're fishing.
Yeah,
and there's not a lot of rigs that can be said about, essentially.